My name is Misty, and at 32 years old, I thought I had my life figured out with my career as a financial advisor. That changed instantly when my younger sister Brooke texted me, "I am quitting my job to find myself, and you will support us while I do." My stomach dropped as I read those words. Our relationship had been strained for years, but this took entitlement to a new level. I replied with 2 words that would upend our family: "Not my problem." If you are watching this video, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button to follow my journey of setting boundaries with family who expect too much. Growing up in our middle-class suburb outside of Boston, the differences between Brooke and me were apparent from an early age. While I saved my allowance and planned for the future, Brooke spent every dollar as soon as it touched her hand. Our parents noticed these differences but responded to them in ways that only reinforced our natural tendencies. "Misty is so responsible. She will be fine," my mother would say, while simultaneously rushing to solve every minor problem Brooke encountered. This dynamic might have remained manageable if our family had stayed intact, but everything changed when our parents divorced when I was 14 and Brooke was 10. The divorce hit our mother hard. Overwhelmed with guilt about breaking up the family, she compensated by doubling down on spoiling Brooke. No request was too extravagant, no tantrum too exhausting to give into. I watched as my sister learned that emotional displays would get her whatever she wanted. Our father moved 3 states away for a new job, and, while he paid child support, his emotional presence in our lives diminished to holiday phone calls and the occasional weekend visit. Without his more practical influence, there was no counterbalance to our mother's enabling behavior. During those formative teenage years, I realized no one was going to create stability for me, so I would need to do it myself. I studied relentlessly, earning scholarships that paid for most of my college education. The remainder I covered with part-time jobs, waiting tables, and tutoring other students. I lived frugally in a cramped apartment with 3 roommates, survived on ramen noodles, and graduated with minimal student loans. Brooke took a different path. She attended an expensive private college on our parents' dime, only to drop out after 3 semesters because she was not feeling fulfilled by the curriculum. She tried again at another school the following year with the same result. Each time, our mother covered the wasted tuition without requiring any accountability. After college, I worked my way up in the financial sector, starting as an administrative assistant and gradually moving into advising roles. I built a reputation for sound judgment and honest guidance. 10 years of discipline and hard work led to my recent promotion to senior financial advisor at one of Boston's most respected firms. Meanwhile, Brooke bounced between jobs in retail, hospitality, and administrative work, never staying anywhere longer than 8 months. Each departure came with a different excuse: toxic workplace, unsupportive management, or simply not being spiritually aligned with the company mission. The gaps between jobs grew longer, and the calls for financial help became more frequent. "Just until my first paycheck comes through," she would plead. Or, "The security deposit and first month's rent are due the same day. I will pay you back when I get my tax return." For years, I stepped in, transferring money to her account while delivering gentle lectures about budgeting and emergency funds. But the loans were rarely repaid, and my advice went unheeded. 6 months ago, after covering her car payment for the 3rd time in a year, I made a promise to myself: no more bailouts. The contrast in our living situations told the whole story. I lived in a modest but nice 1-bedroom apartment that reflected my practical values. Nothing extravagant, but comfortable and within my means. Brooke, despite her chronically unstable income, somehow maintained a luxury rental in one of Boston's trendiest neighborhoods, with a closet full of designer clothes and a social media feed full of brunches and weekend getaways. Every family gathering became an opportunity for her to subtly highlight my boring lifestyle, while our mother applauded her for living life to the fullest. No one seemed interested in acknowledging that my boring choices were what allowed me to sleep soundly at night, free from the anxiety of impending financial disaster. When Brooke called to congratulate me on my promotion 2 months ago, I sensed something was off. The questions she asked were not about the work I would be doing or the achievement itself, but rather about the increase in my salary and benefits. Looking back, I should have recognized this as the reconnaissance mission it was. At our mother's birthday dinner last month, Brooke casually mentioned that her current job in event planning was stifling her creativity, and she was considering a change. Our mother nodded supportively, suggesting that life was too short to stay in an unfulfilling job. I noticed they both glanced at me, as if gauging my reaction. I chose to focus on my pasta rather than engage. Now I understand that these moments were the warning tremors before the earthquake that was about to hit. The foundation of our family relationship was built on roles we had played for decades. Brooke as the free spirit who needed help, our mother as the supportive enabler, and me as the responsible one expected to pick up the pieces. But foundations can crack, and that is exactly what happened when Brooke sent that text. Tuesday started like any other workday. I arrived at the office early, coffee in hand, ready to prepare for a presentation to potential clients that afternoon. The team was counting on me to close this account, and I had spent the weekend perfecting my pitch. My phone buzzed at 9:30, but I ignored it, assuming it was a notification from one of my apps. When it buzzed 3 more times in quick succession, I glanced down, thinking it might be my boss, with a last-minute change to the presentation. Instead, I saw Brooke's name and a preview of a message that made my stomach clench. I opened the full text and stared in disbelief. Big news! I just quit my job. I have been doing a lot of soul-searching and realized I need time to find myself. I am planning to take 6 months to travel and focus on personal growth. Since you just got that big promotion, I figured you could support us while I do this. I will need help with my rent, $2,300, car payment, $450, and about $1,000 for monthly expenses. Also, I want to do a wellness retreat in Arizona next month that costs $3,800. This is really important for my journey. Let me know when you can transfer the first payment. Love you. The audacity of the message left me speechless. There was no question in her phrasing, no request, just an assumption that I would bankroll her extended vacation from responsibility. My mind raced with calculations. She was asking for nearly $8,000 for the first month alone, and over $3,700 for each month after that. The total would exceed $25,000 for the 6-month journey she had planned. I set my phone down and took several deep breaths. My instinct, honed by years of family conditioning, was to call her immediately and explain why this would not work, to offer alternatives and suggestions. But a small voice inside me whispered that this pattern would never end unless I changed my response. For 20 minutes, I stared at my computer screen, unable to focus on the presentation, wrestling with what to do. Finally, I picked up my phone and typed a reply that would forever change our relationship. Not my problem. I paused before hitting send, my thumb hovering over the screen. Was I being too harsh? But then, I remembered all the times I had drained my own savings to rescue her, all the while watching her make the same reckless choices, again and again. I pressed send. 3 dots appeared immediately, showing she was typing a response. Before she could send it, I added another message. By the way, I have accepted a job opportunity in London. I start Monday. This was not how I had planned to share my news. I had been quietly interviewing for an international position for months, and had received the offer just yesterday. I had planned to tell my family over dinner this weekend, presenting it as the exciting career advancement it was. Instead, it came out as a defensive maneuver. My phone rang seconds later. Brooke's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call and silenced my phone. I needed to focus on my presentation, and I knew from experience that any conversation with Brooke when she was upset would be lengthy and emotionally draining. I somehow made it through my workday, successfully delivering the presentation despite the emotional turmoil churning inside me. When I finally checked my phone at 5 o'clock, I found 15 missed calls, 9 from Brooke, and 6 from our mother. There were also dozens of texts, ranging from confused to pleading to angry. From Brooke: "What do you mean, not my problem? Are you serious right now? Call me back immediately. I cannot believe you would abandon me like this when I need you. London? When were you going to tell me about this? You are being incredibly selfish." From my mother: "Misty, call your sister. She is very upset. I do not understand why you would respond so cruelly to her news. Family supports family. That is what we do. We need to discuss this as a family. Call me as soon as possible." As I walked to my car, my phone rang again. It was Brooke. With a deep breath, I answered, bracing myself for the storm. "How could you?" she demanded, without even a hello. "I shared something important and vulnerable with you, and you just dismissed me completely." "Brooke," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "quitting your job without any plan and expecting me to fund your lifestyle is not something I can support. It is not fair to ask that of me." "I am not asking for a handout," she snapped. "I am asking for support from my sister during a transitional period. This is about my mental health and personal growth." "And what about my financial health?" I countered. "Have you considered what a burden this would be for me?" "Burden?" Her voice rose an octave. "You just got a huge promotion. You are moving to London. Clearly you are doing fine financially. The promotion and the move are the results of years of hard work and careful planning," I explained. "Neither of which gives you the right to access my income." "I cannot believe how selfish you have become," she said, her voice breaking. "Success has changed you." The conversation continued in circles for nearly an hour, with Brooke alternating between anger, emotional manipulation, and attempts to make me feel guilty. I remained firm, repeating that, while I cared about her well-being, I would not be financing her decision to quit her job. "Fine," she finally said, her voice cold. "If that is how you want it to be, I will figure it out myself, but do not expect me to be there for you when you need something." The irony of her statement was not lost on me, but I let it go. "I hope you do figure it out," I said sincerely. "I think you are capable of more than you give yourself credit for." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in my parked car, emotionally exhausted, but also feeling a strange sense of relief. For the first time in our adult lives, I had refused to rescue Brooke. The ground beneath our relationship had shifted, and there was no going back. I had just finished microwaving a frozen dinner when my phone rang again. My mother's name appeared on the screen, and I briefly considered letting it go to voicemail. But delaying the inevitable would only prolong the stress, so I answered. "Hello, Mom." "Misty, what is going on?" Her voice held that familiar tone of disappointment that had the power to make me feel like a misbehaving child again. "Your sister is absolutely devastated." I sat down at my small kitchen table and prepared myself for the conversation. "I am guessing she told you about her plan to quit her job and have me support her? She is going through a difficult time right now and needs to focus on her well-being," my mother said, neatly sidestepping the financial aspect. "She has been feeling very lost lately, and I sympathize with that," I replied. "But that does not mean I am responsible for covering all her expenses while she finds herself." "It would only be temporary," my mother insisted. "And family helps family. That is what we do." "Mom, she is asking for thousands of dollars every month. That is not a small favor. And what about all the other times I have helped her financially? Those were supposed to be temporary too, but the pattern just keeps repeating." My mother sighed heavily. "I do not understand why you are being so cold about this. You have always been the strong one, the responsible one. Your sister is different. She feels things more deeply." There it was, the familiar refrain that had shaped our family dynamic for as long as I could remember. Brooke's feelings and needs were always presented as more urgent, more deserving of attention and accommodation than mine. "Being responsible does not mean I should have to fund her irresponsibility," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "And what about this job in London you apparently did not think was worth mentioning to me? When exactly were you planning to tell us about that?" I was going to tell everyone this weekend, I explained. I just received the official offer yesterday. And you accepted without discussing it with your family? Without considering how it would affect your sister? The implication that I should have consulted with them before making a decision about my own career sent a spike of frustration through me. Mom, I am 32 years old. This is an incredible opportunity for my career. Why would my job decision be based on Brooke's financial situation? The conversation continued for another 40 minutes, following the same circular pattern as my call with Brooke. No matter how I tried to explain my perspective, my mother could not or would not see the situation from my point of view. When we finally ended the call, nothing had been resolved, and the tension remained thick in the air. I tried to distract myself with television, but could not focus on the show. My phone remained mercifully silent for about an hour. Then, at 9:45, a text from my mother appeared. Banned from Thanksgiving until you sign your sister's $110,000 loan. This family stands together or not at all. I stared at the message in shock. Loan? What loan? This was the first I had heard of any loan. And $110,000? The amount was staggering. I called my mother back immediately, but she did not answer. I tried Brooke next, with the same result. With growing alarm, I searched through my emails, finding nothing related to a loan application. I checked my physical mail from the past week, discovering an opened envelope from Somerset Financial that I had assumed was junk mail. Inside was a loan agreement for $110,000 with my name listed as the co-signer. The form only needed my signature to be complete. My hands shook as I realized what had happened. Brooke had applied for a massive loan and put me down as the co-signer without my knowledge or consent. The finding herself journey suddenly made more sense. It was not just about monthly expenses, but about securing a six-figure loan that I would ultimately be responsible for when she inevitably defaulted. The betrayal cut deep. This was not just irresponsibility, it was calculated deception. And now my mother was using our family holiday tradition as leverage to pressure me into signing. Thanksgiving at our family home had been the one constant throughout all the turmoil of our lives. Even during college when money was tight, I had always found a way to get home for the holiday. After our father left, it became even more important, as one of the few times we still felt like a complete family. My mother knew exactly how much this tradition meant to me, and she was weaponizing it without hesitation. As I sat with this painful realization, I began to see our family dynamic with new clarity. For years I had viewed my role as the responsible one as simply part of my personality, a choice I had made. But now I understood that I had been cast in this role by my family, expected to sacrifice my own needs and desires whenever Brooke's latest crisis demanded it. The ultimatum about Thanksgiving was not really about the holiday itself. It was about maintaining the system that had been in place for decades. Brooke creates problems, Mom enables her, and I pay the price both emotionally and financially. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully feel the resentment that had been building for years. But alongside the anger was a growing sense of determination. I would not sign that loan. I would not continue to participate in this dysfunctional system, even if it meant spending Thanksgiving alone. As I processed these thoughts, another alarming realization struck me. If Brooke was willing to put my name on a loan without my consent, what other financial entanglements might exist that I did not know about? I grabbed my laptop and began investigating. I discovered that Brooke was an authorized user on one of my credit cards, something I had set up years ago to help her build credit but had forgotten to revoke. Our Netflix, Hulu, and Spotify accounts were all in my name, with Brooke using them freely. We still shared a family phone plan that I was the primary account holder for. And according to my Amazon purchase history, Brooke had somehow gained access to my account and had been ordering items regularly, charging them to my saved payment method. The extent of the financial enmeshment was worse than I had imagined. It was as if Brooke had quietly woven herself into every aspect of my financial life, creating a situation where disentangling myself would be difficult and uncomfortable but increasingly necessary. With a growing sense of urgency, I opened my laptop and began methodically reviewing every account that had my name attached to it. I created a spreadsheet listing each account, whether Brooke had access, and what actions I needed to take. The list was longer than I expected, revealing just how deeply our finances had become entangled over the years. First, I called my credit card company and removed Brooke as an authorized user. The customer service representative asked if I would like to order a replacement card with a new number, warning me that any automatic payments would need to be updated. Yes, I said firmly. I need a completely new card number. While inconvenient, it was necessary to ensure Brooke could not continue using the account. Next, I changed the passwords on all my streaming services: Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, and Spotify. I felt a twinge of guilt as I imagined Brooke discovering in the middle of her favorite show that she no longer had access. But I reminded myself that at 30, she was perfectly capable of paying for her own entertainment. The family phone plan was trickier. Canceling it outright would leave Brooke without phone service, which seemed unnecessarily harsh. Instead, I called the provider and arranged for her line to be transferred to her own account in 30 days, giving her time to take over the responsibility or find another solution. As I worked through my list, my hands began to shake, and I felt a tightness in my chest that I recognized as anxiety. Setting boundaries with family was unfamiliar territory, and each action felt both liberating and terrifying. The most important step was contacting Somerset Financial about the loan. I called their customer service line and explained that my name had been used as a potential co-signer without my knowledge or consent. The representative sounded concerned and transferred me to their fraud department. "This happens more often than you might think," the fraud specialist told me sympathetically. "Family members assume it is okay to use each other's information, but it is actually fraud if done without consent." I hesitated, not wanting to get Brooke in legal trouble despite everything. "I do not want to press charges," I clarified. "I just want to make sure this loan does not proceed with my name attached to it." The specialist noted this in their system and advised me to send a formal letter stating that I had not authorized the use of my information. Additionally, she recommended that I place a freeze on my credit reports to prevent any similar attempts in the future. Following her advice, I visited the websites for all 3 major credit bureaus and placed freezes on my reports. This would prevent anyone, including me, from opening new credit accounts in my name without additional verification. It was an inconvenience, but a necessary precaution. Throughout this process, my phone continued to buzz with calls and texts from both Brooke and my mother. I silenced it, needing to focus on protecting myself before engaging in more emotional confrontations. As I completed the last item on my list, I took screenshots of all the confirmation pages and emails, creating a digital record of the steps I had taken. I also took screenshots of the text exchanges with Brooke and my mother, saving them as evidence of what had transpired. The clock on my laptop showed it was nearly midnight when I finally closed it. Exhaustion washed over me, but alongside it was a feeling of accomplishment. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had prioritized my own financial well-being over my family's expectations. The doorbell rang, startling me. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole to see my friend Rachel standing in the hallway, holding a bottle of wine and a paper bag that I guessed contained takeout. "I got your text," she said when I opened the door. "You said family emergency, so I brought reinforcements." I had texted Rachel hours earlier, when I first discovered the loan application, but had been so caught up in damage control that I had forgotten I had reached out. "You are a lifesaver," I said, ushering her in. Rachel had been my friend since college and had witnessed the Brooke situation from the beginning. Unlike my family, she had never hesitated to point out the unhealthy dynamics at play. "So, what happened this time?" she asked, as she poured wine into 2 glasses. I recounted the day's events, from Brooke's initial text to my mother's Thanksgiving ultimatum, and finally to my discovery of the unauthorized loan application. Rachel's expression grew increasingly outraged as I spoke. They are completely out of line, she said when I finished. Both of them. The loan thing is actually illegal, you know. I know, I sighed. But I do not want to press charges against my own sister. The fact that you are even having to consider that option shows how messed up this situation is, Rachel pointed out. And your mom threatening to ban you from Thanksgiving? That is emotional blackmail, pure and simple. Hearing someone else name these behaviors was validating. For so long, I had accepted them as normal family dynamics, but through Rachel's eyes, I could see just how toxic they truly were. And this London job, Rachel continued, her face brightening. That is huge, Misty. Congratulations. When do you leave? The reminder of my new position shifted the energy in the room. Monday, I replied, allowing myself to feel excitement about it for the first time since Brooke's text. It is a 2-year contract with their international division. The compensation package is amazing, and it includes housing for the first 3 months while I find a permanent place. This is exactly what you have been working toward, Rachel said, raising her glass in a toast. To new beginnings and healthy boundaries. As we clinked glasses, I felt a surge of confidence in my decision. The overseas move, which had initially been just a career advancement, now represented something more, a fresh start away from the dysfunctional patterns that had defined my family relationships for too long. Do you think I am doing the right thing? I asked Rachel, voicing the doubt that still lingered despite my resolved actions. I think you are finally doing what you should have done years ago, she replied without hesitation. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep Brooke warm. And honestly, continuing to bail her out is not even helping her. She needs to learn to stand on her own 2 feet. Rachel's perspective strengthened my resolve. This was not just about protecting my finances. It was about breaking a cycle that was harmful to both Brooke and me. By refusing to enable her further, I was actually giving her the opportunity to develop the self-reliance she so desperately needed. As Rachel left around 1 in the morning, she hugged me tightly. I am proud of you, she whispered. Stay strong. I closed the door behind her, feeling both emotionally drained and somehow lighter than I had in years. My phone showed 22 missed calls accumulated throughout the evening, 12 from Brooke, 8 from my mother, and surprisingly, 2 from my father, who rarely involved himself in our conflicts. Tomorrow would bring more confrontations and difficult conversations, but for tonight, I had done what needed to be done. I had finally drawn a line in the sand, and despite the emotional cost, I knew it was long overdue. I woke the next morning to the insistent buzzing of my phone. 22 missed calls overnight, and now more coming in as the new day began. I silenced the phone again and took a shower, mentally preparing myself for the conversations ahead. Of the 22 missed calls, 12 were from Brooke, ranging from late night to early morning hours. 8 were from my mother, clustered mostly in the evening after her Thanksgiving ultimatum text. The remaining 2, surprisingly, were from my father, who had called around 11 p.m. The voicemails told the story of escalating emotions throughout the night. Brooke's messages started with anger. Call me back right now. This is ridiculous. Min. Progressed to tearful pleading. Please, Misty, I really need your help. I would do the same for you. And eventually descended into threats. If you do not call me back, I will come to your apartment. My mother's voicemails were heavy with disappointment and guilt-inducing language. I did not raise you to abandon family in times of need, she said in one message. Your sister is devastated, and I have to pick up the pieces because you refuse to help. The most surprising messages came from my father. Misty, it is Dad. Your mother called me about some situation with Brooke. Call me when you can. His second message, left an hour later, was more direct. I heard about the loan business. We should talk before you make any decisions. After fortifying myself with coffee, I decided to address the situation head-on, with a group text to Brooke, my mother, and my father. I have received all your calls and messages. To be completely clear, I will not be signing as a co-signer on any loan. Using my name on a loan application without my consent is fraud, and I have already contacted the bank to alert them. I have removed Brooke as an authorized user on my credit card and changed the passwords to all subscription services in my name. The phone plan will remain active for 30 days, giving Brooke time to establish her own account. My decision to accept a position in London was made before any of this happened and is unrelated. I am not abandoning anyone. I am simply refusing to continue enabling financial irresponsibility. I am willing to discuss this calmly if anyone wants to have a productive conversation. I pressed send and braced myself for the response. It came almost immediately. First from Brooke. I cannot believe you are doing this to me. I was going to pay back the loan. I just needed your credit score to get approved. Now I have nothing. Thanks for ruining my life. My mother's reply followed moments later. Misty, this is not how we raised you to behave. Family stands together through everything. I am deeply disappointed in your choices. The Thanksgiving ban stands until you show more compassion for your sister's situation. My father, surprisingly, took longer to respond. When his message finally came through, it was brief but unexpected. Misty, call me privately. I want to hear your side. Before I could decide whom to respond to first, my phone began ringing with calls from extended family members. My mother's sister, Aunt Tina, called to express her shock at my abandonment of Brooke. My cousin Stephanie texted to ask why I was being so harsh with my sister when she was just going through a tough time. It became clear that my mother had mobilized the family against me, sharing a version of events that cast me as the villain and Brooke as the victim. The family gossip network was in full swing, with relatives I rarely spoke to suddenly finding it necessary to weigh in on my personal decisions. I declined most of these calls, responding only to text messages with a brief, "This is a private matter between Brooke and me. I appreciate your concern, but I am not discussing it further." Social media became another battlefield. Brooke posted a vague but clearly targeted status. Found out who really has my back today. Blood does not always mean loyalty. The post received dozens of sympathetic comments, including several from our mother expressing her support for Brooke during this difficult betrayal. I resisted the urge to defend myself online, knowing it would only escalate the drama. Instead, I muted both their profiles and focused on preparing for my move to London, which suddenly could not come soon enough. Amid the barrage of criticism, a few unexpected allies emerged. My grandfather, my mother's father, called to offer his support. "Your grandmother and I have watched this pattern for years," he said in his gravelly voice. "It is about time somebody stood up to it. Do not let them bully you, kiddo." My cousin Emily, who had always been closer to me than to Brooke, sent a private message. "For what it is worth, I think you are doing the right thing. Aunt Susan and Brooke have always had this weird dynamic, and you always get caught in the middle. Break the cycle." These small gestures of support meant more than they could know, providing islands of validation in a sea of criticism. As the day progressed, I received updates from family members about Brooke's situation. Apparently, she had moved back in with our mother, bringing most of her belongings and her cat, claiming she could no longer afford her apartment without my help. My mother, predictably, had welcomed her with open arms, converting the home office back into Brooke's bedroom within hours. The irony was not lost on me. Brooke had managed to achieve her goal of not having to support herself, just not in the way she had initially planned. Instead of extracting money from me, she had secured free housing and presumably food and other necessities from our mother. My father finally called again in the evening. Unlike my mother and sister, he listened to my explanation without interrupting. When I finished recounting the events, including the unauthorized loan application, he sighed heavily. "This is not the first time something like this has happened," he revealed. 2 years ago, Brooke tried to open a credit card in my name. I caught it before it went through and confronted her. She swore it was a one-time mistake and begged me not to tell anyone. I believed her and kept quiet to protect her. His words sent a chill through me. This was not impulsive behavior, but a pattern of deliberate financial manipulation. "Why did you not tell me?" I asked, hurt that he had kept this information from me. I should have, he admitted. But after the divorce, I felt I had already failed you girls in so many ways. I did not want to make things worse by turning you against each other. That was my mistake, and I am sorry. His apology was unexpected and oddly comforting. For the first time in this ordeal, someone was taking responsibility for their actions, rather than demanding that I take responsibility for Brooke's. What should I do now? I asked him, suddenly feeling like the confused child I had been during the divorce. Stand your ground, he said firmly. You are doing the right thing, both for yourself and, though she cannot see it now, for Brooke too. As for Thanksgiving, if Susan follows through on her threat, you are welcome to spend it with me and Linda. Linda was his second wife, a kind woman I had met only a handful of times due to the geographic distance between us. The offer touched me deeply. My father and I had never been close after the divorce, our relationship reduced to obligatory phone calls and occasional visits. This invitation felt like the first step towards something new. As the week progressed, the intensity of the family drama remained high. My mother continued her emotional appeals, alternating between anger and tearful pleas. Brooke vacillated between ignoring me completely and sending long, accusatory texts about my betrayal. Extended family members took sides, with the majority supporting Brooke and my mother, at least publicly. Through it all, I maintained my position. I was polite but firm in my refusals, and I focused my energy on preparing for my move to London. Each box I packed represented another step toward freedom from the toxic family dynamics that had constrained me for so long. The night before my flight, as I sat surrounded by packed boxes in my nearly empty apartment, I received a text from my mother that showed just how little had changed despite the week's turmoil. Brooke needs a laptop for job applications. Can you leave yours when you go? You will get a new one for work anyway. I stared at the message in disbelief. Even now, after everything, the expectation that I should sacrifice for Brooke remained unshaken. I typed a simple response. Number. My laptop is coming with me to London. I turned my phone off after that, unwilling to engage further. Tomorrow, I would board a plane and put an ocean between myself and these unhealthy expectations. The distance would be physical, but I hoped it would create emotional space as well. Space to build a life defined by my own choices, rather than my family's demands. The days before my departure passed in a whirlwind of logistics. I had arranged for most of my furniture to be sold or donated, keeping only a few cherished items that would be shipped to London once I found permanent housing. My life was being distilled into 4 suitcases and a carry-on bag, a process that was both terrifying and strangely liberating. Through it all, the family drama continued to simmer. My mother's messages grew increasingly desperate as she realized I was actually leaving. You cannot just run away from your family responsibilities, she texted. What kind of daughter abandons her mother and sister? The guilt these messages triggered was real, but so was my determination. This was not abandonment, it was self-preservation. I had accepted the London position before any of this happened, but the timing now seemed providential, offering me physical distance during this painful family reconfiguration. Rachel and 2 other close friends helped with the final packing and cleaning of my apartment. They created a buffer between me and my family, screening calls and running interference, when Brooke actually showed up at my door, unannounced the day before my flight. She is busy packing, Rachel told her firmly from the doorway, refusing to let her in. This is not a good time. She is my sister, Brooke had protested. I have a right to see her before she leaves the country. You had plenty of opportunities to see her, without trying to exploit her financially, Rachel had replied, her voice cool. She will contact you when she is ready. I listened to this exchange from the bedroom, simultaneously grateful for Rachel's protection, and sad that it had come to this hiding from my own sister. My last day in Boston was spent tying up loose ends. A final meeting with my financial advisor to arrange management of my U.S. accounts while abroad, turning in my apartment keys, and having a quiet dinner with the friends who had supported me through this crisis. I never thought family drama would be what finally pushed me into therapy. I confessed over dessert, but I made an appointment with someone who specializes in family relationships. It is virtual, so I can continue from London. That is a really healthy step, Rachel approved. This stuff runs deep, and having professional support will help. The therapist I had spoken with briefly on the phone had explained that what I was experiencing was common in families with enmeshment issues. Enmeshment, she had said, is when boundaries between family members become blurred or non-existent. It often creates unhealthy dependencies and roles that can be difficult to break without outside help. The term had resonated deeply, giving a name to the dynamic I had been struggling with for years. I was the responsible one, the fixer, the bank. Brooke was the troubled one who needed saving. Our mother was the enabler who facilitated the cycle. We had all been playing our assigned roles for so long that any attempt to change the script was met with resistance and accusations of betrayal. On the morning of my flight, I woke to a text from my father. "Safe travels. Proud of you for making this move. Call when you are settled." His simple message of support brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Our relationship had been a casualty of the divorce, but perhaps this crisis was creating an opportunity for reconnection. The flight to London was 8 hours of limbo, suspended between my old life and the new one awaiting me. I used the time to journal, pouring out the complex emotions of the past week. Anger, guilt, grief, and underneath it all, a growing sense of excitement about the future I was claiming for myself. Upon landing at Heathrow, I switched on my phone to find more messages from my mother and Brooke, but I ignored them for now. Instead, I texted Rachel to let her know I had arrived safely, then followed the instructions from my new employer to find the car service they had arranged. The company had booked me into a serviced apartment in Kensington for the first 3 months, giving me time to learn the city and find a more permanent residence. As the driver navigated the unfamiliar streets, I gazed out at London passing by, feeling both overwhelmed and exhilarated by the newness of everything. My first week at the new job was intense but invigorating. The international division was smaller than the Boston office, with a close-knit team that welcomed me warmly. The work was challenging in exactly the ways I had hoped for, pushing me to expand my skills while building on my existing expertise. During breaks, I found myself checking my phone less frequently for messages from home. The time difference created a natural buffer, with their messages arriving while I was asleep and mine being sent when they were not yet awake. This asynchronous communication helped dilute the emotional intensity, allowing me to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. I established a routine of responding to my mother once a day, usually with brief updates about my new job and surroundings. I ignored her continuing attempts to discuss Brooke's financial situation or to guilt me about abandoning them. With Brooke, I was even more distant, acknowledging her messages but declining to engage with her accusations or requests. With my father, however, communication increased. We spoke by video call every weekend, conversations that started awkwardly but gradually became more comfortable. He seemed genuinely interested in my new life, asking questions about my work and encouraging my exploration of London. My first therapy session, conducted via video from my London apartment, helped put the family situation in perspective. "What you are experiencing is a normal grief response," the therapist explained. "You are mourning the family you wished you had, the relationships you hoped were possible. At the same time, you are establishing healthy boundaries for perhaps the first time. Both processes can be painful." She introduced me to concepts like differentiation, the ability to maintain your own identity, and self-governance within a family system, and familial financial abuse, the use of money as a means of control or manipulation within families. These frameworks helped me understand that what I had experienced was not normal or healthy, despite my family's insistence that it was simply what families do for each other. As October turned to November, the approaching Thanksgiving holiday loomed large in my thoughts. It would be the first one I had ever spent away from family, and despite everything, I felt a pang of sadness at breaking tradition. My mother's ban remained in effect, as I had not signed the loan for Brooke. "We will miss you at Thanksgiving," she texted, somehow making it sound like my absence was my choice rather than her ultimatum. "There is still time to change your mind and do the right thing." I did not respond to the implied demand, instead focusing on creating new traditions for myself. A group of American expats at my company had organized a Thanksgiving dinner at one of their homes, and I had accepted their invitation gratefully. The day itself was bittersweet. I woke to messages from both my mother and Brooke, sharing photos of the family gathering without me. The table was set as always, the turkey golden brown, everyone smiling for the camera. My absence was conspicuously unmentioned, as if I had chosen not to be there for no reason at all. I allowed myself a good cry that morning, grieving the loss of the family connection I had valued, despite its dysfunction. Then I dressed for the expat Thanksgiving, bringing the apple pie I had baked in my small London kitchen, using a recipe handed down from my grandmother. The gathering was warm and welcoming, full of people who understood the complex emotions of celebrating an American holiday far from home. We shared stories of our families, both the loving moments and the difficult ones. I found myself opening up about my situation, surprised by how many others had experienced similar family tensions. "The first holiday apart is the hardest," said Jennifer, an expat who had been in London for 5 years. "It gets easier, I promise." And sometimes the distance actually helps heal relationships, given enough time. As I walked home that night through the cool London air, I realized that while I had indeed missed my family's Thanksgiving, I had not missed having a meaningful holiday. Perhaps that was the most important lesson in all of this. I could create connection and belonging wherever I went. My life did not have to be defined by the roles my family had assigned me. When I returned to my apartment, I found an email from my father with a simple subject line, "Proud of you." Inside was a photo of him and his wife Linda at their own small Thanksgiving dinner, with the message, "Wish you could have been here, but so proud of you for making the right choices for yourself. The invitation stands for Christmas, if you can make the trip." His continued support touched me deeply. Perhaps, I thought as I prepared for bed, the family relationships worth nurturing were not always the ones we expected. Sometimes they were the quiet ones, the ones that respected boundaries and celebrated independence rather than demanding compliance and sacrifice. As I drifted off to sleep in my London apartment, thousands of miles from the family drama that had consumed me just weeks before, I felt a growing sense of peace. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in years, I was walking a path of my own choosing. 3 months into my London life, the city was beginning to feel like home. I had found a small but charming apartment in Notting Hill, decorated it with a mix of local finds and a few treasured items shipped from Boston, and established routines that grounded me in my new reality. The job continued to challenge and fulfill me, with my boss recently hinting at an expanded role in the coming year. My relationship with my family had evolved in unexpected ways during this time. Contact with my mother had decreased to brief, surface-level exchanges once or twice a week. She had finally stopped mentioning the loan, or trying to guilt me about moving away, though she occasionally slipped in updates about Brooke that were clearly designed to elicit sympathy or concern. From these updates, and from conversations with my father, I learned that Brooke had finally found a job at a local marketing firm. The position paid less than her previous one, but it was stable work with potential for growth. More significantly, she had moved out of our mother's house and into a smaller, more affordable apartment with a roommate. "Necessity is a powerful motivator," my father remarked during one of our weekly video calls. "Without you to fall back on, and with your mother's resources stretched thin after supporting her for 2 months, Brooke had to figure things out on her own." I felt a complex mix of emotions at this news pride, that my sister was showing resilience, satisfaction that my boundary setting had contributed to her growth, and a lingering sadness that it had taken such a dramatic rupture to catalyze this change. My therapy sessions had helped me process these feelings and understand that I could hold seemingly contradictory emotions simultaneously. I could be glad that Brooke was becoming more independent, while still grieving the sister relationship I had always wanted, but never truly had. I could miss aspects of my former life while embracing the freedom and opportunities of my new one. The therapist had also helped me identify patterns in my own behavior that had contributed to the unhealthy family dynamic. My need for approval, my difficulty saying no, my tendency to take responsibility for others' problems, all these had made me susceptible to the roles my family had assigned me. Recognizing these patterns was the first step toward changing them. As Christmas approached, I faced another decision about family gatherings. My mother had extended a cautious invitation. "You are welcome for Christmas, if you can make the trip home." The notable absence of any mention of Brooke or financial expectations suggested that perhaps she too was beginning to accept our new relationship parameters. My father and Linda had also invited me to spend the holiday with them in Connecticut. After careful consideration, I decided to accept my father's invitation. While I was open to rebuilding connections with my mother and sister, I was not ready to return to the scene of so much conflict without clearer boundaries in place. I booked a 10-day trip back to the States, planning to spend Christmas with my father and then meet individually with my mother and Brooke in neutral locations before returning to London. The Christmas visit with my father and Linda was healing in ways I had not anticipated. In their home, I was simply Misty the daughter, the financial professional, the woman building a new life in London. There were no expectations that I would solve problems or provide financial support, no subtle manipulations or guilt trips. The simplicity of being accepted for who I was, without additional roles or responsibilities, felt like a gift. On December 27th, I met my mother for lunch at a restaurant halfway between her home and my father's. The neutral territory helped maintain the boundaries I had been working to establish. "You look well," she said as we were seated. "London agrees with you." "It does," I confirmed. "The work is challenging, and I am making friends. It feels right." We navigated carefully around potentially triggering topics, sticking to safe subjects like her garden club activities and my explorations of British museums. But eventually, as our entrees arrived, she broached the subject we had been avoiding. "I owe you an apology," she said, surprising me with her directness. "The way I handled the situation with Brooke and the loan, that was wrong. I should never have given you that ultimatum about Thanksgiving." I set down my fork, taken aback by this unexpected acknowledgement. "Thank you for saying that," I replied carefully. "It hurt to be excluded, especially over something that should have been my decision to make." She nodded, looking down at her plate. "Seeing how Brooke has managed these past few months, it has made me rethink some things. Maybe I have not always helped her in the ways she truly needed." This admission, however tentative, represented a significant shift in my mother's perspective. For most of our lives, any suggestion that her enabling behavior might be harmful to Brooke had been met with fierce denial and accusations that I was being selfish or uncaring. We did not resolve everything in that lunch. Decades of established patterns could not be undone in a single conversation. But we made a start, agreeing to continue working on our relationship with clearer communication and greater respect for each other's boundaries. My meeting with Brooke the following day was more challenging. We met at a coffee shop near her new apartment, the tension between us immediately apparent in her defensive posture and averted eyes. "So you are slumming it with the commoners now? That you are a big international banker?" she said as I sat down, her tone attempting humor, but landing closer to bitterness. I chose not to engage with the barb. "Your new place sounds nice," I said instead. "How is the roommate situation working out?" Gradually, as our conversation continued, some of Brooke's defensiveness faded. She told me about her job, which she described as not exactly dream work, but it pays the bills. She had started taking online classes toward finishing her long-abandoned degree, this time in marketing, rather than the fine arts focus she had previously pursued. When I asked what had prompted these changes, she shrugged. "Reality, I guess. When you left, and Mom made it clear she could not support me indefinitely, I had to figure it out." There was a flash of the old resentment in her eyes as she added, "Not that you gave me much choice." "You always had choices, Brooke," I said gently. "They just might not have been the easy ones you wanted." She was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee. "The loan thing," she finally said. "I should not have done that. I know it was wrong." It was not quite an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, which was more than I had expected. "Why did you do it?" I asked, genuinely curious about her thinking. "I thought you would just sign it once it was all set up," she admitted. "You always came through before, and the money would have helped me start over, maybe open my own event planning business eventually." I did not see it as taking advantage, more like an investment in my future. Her explanation highlighted the fundamental disconnect in our perspectives. What I saw as financial exploitation, she had viewed as a reasonable request for investment, based on our history of me always coming through. "I need you to understand something," I said carefully. "I want you to succeed. I want you to be happy. But my money is not your safety net. It never should have been." Brooke nodded slowly. "I get that now. I do not like it, but I get it." We parted with a tentative hug, our relationship still fragile, but perhaps beginning to rebuild on more honest foundations. Back in London, I reflected on these conversations with my therapist. "Family relationships are constantly evolving," she reminded me. "What matters is not reaching some perfect resolution, but establishing healthier patterns of interaction moving forward." As the new year began, I felt a growing confidence in the boundaries I had established. The distance, physical, financial, and emotional, had created space for everyone to adjust to new roles and expectations. My mother was learning to relate to me as an independent adult, rather than a resource for Brooke. Brooke was developing self-reliance out of necessity, and I was discovering who I could be when not defined primarily by family obligations. The lessons of the past months had been difficult, but invaluable. Financial independence requires emotional independence. As long as I allowed financial enmeshment with my family, true autonomy would be impossible. Helping is not always helpful. What I had thought of as supporting my sister had actually enabled behaviors that kept her dependent and immature. Boundaries are not punishments. Setting limits on what I would give financially was not about hurting Brooke or my mother, but about creating the conditions for healthier relationships. Love does not mean unlimited access to resources. I could love my family deeply, while still saying no to financial demands. Perhaps the most important lesson was about my own worth. For too long, I had measured my value in my family by what I could provide, what problems I could solve, what bills I could pay, what stability I could create. Now I was learning that I was enough, just as myself, without the added role of family banker or problem solver. 6 months after moving to London, I received an unexpected email from Brooke. She had attached photos of a small office space she had just leased for her new side business, a modest event planning service she was building, while keeping her day job. "I did this myself," she wrote. "My own savings, my own business plan, my own lease negotiation. Thought you might want to know." The pride in her message was unmistakable, as was the subtext. "Look what I can do without your help." I smiled as I typed my reply. "It looks amazing, Brooke. I am incredibly proud of you." And I was. Perhaps this was the silver lining to our painful family rupture. By refusing to continue our unhealthy financial entanglement, I had given Brooke the opportunity to discover her own strength and capability, something no amount of money could have provided. As for me, I was thriving in my London life, building connections that were chosen rather than obligatory, based on mutual respect rather than family roles. The ocean between me and my family had created space for new understanding on all sides. We were still learning, still making mistakes, still navigating the complex terrain of adult family relationships. But we were doing so with greater awareness and more honest communication than ever before. In the end, those two words, "Not my problem," had not been a rejection of my family, but a reclamation of myself. They had been the beginning of a journey toward healthier relationships all around, painful as the transition had been. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members over money? How did it affect your relationships? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to prioritize their own financial well-being. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to say "not my problem" when appropriate.